Bone remodeling is building and breaking down of bone tissue other than just for growth. About 10 to 20% of your bone tissue is replaced each year. The cells involved are the osteoblasts that build the new bone, and then there are osteoclasts that remove bone matrix. We call building the new bone bone deposition, and taking it apart bone resorption, like reabsorption, but shoved together. The major regulation on bone remodeling is hormones. Most of the time, that's just for maintaining your blood calcium levels. You need to keep the right amount in your plasma for your muscles and nerves to work properly. If it's too high, you'll put some in the bones. If there's not enough, you'll take some out of the bones, and the hormones control those changes. There are also hormones that affect growth, like growth hormone and the sex hormones that start in puberty. Exercise affects bone remodeling. Weight-bearing exercise like hiking, but not swimming, where the water is supporting your weight, puts weight on your bones and it increases bone deposition. You're basically telling your body that you need that strength to support you. Other stresses can change the shape of bone. Bumps like this start out smaller and smoother, and as you start walking and putting more stress on it, they grow larger and rougher because there's more strain put on that part of the bone. So a lot of the bumps that we'll see as we look at the bones in lab are places where muscles attach, and that strain causes increased bone deposition there. Changes can also be made to the shape of bone. Some classic examples are the Chinese foot binding. It's a thing they used to do with girls starting as babies, is they would restrain their feet. There wasn't room for them to grow because they thought tiny feet were pretty. So adult women would have these little kid feet because that was all the growth they could get. There's also the bow-legged cowboy example. Here's the femur, which was also the one I was holding up. And to show this in the illustration, it's going to have to be a bit exaggerated. As you ride a horse a lot and press the medial side of the femur against its sides, that puts stress here. The body builds more bone on the opposite side and then removes bone on the side the stress is coming from. So that the whole thing doesn't get too large. And so over time, the bone gradually becomes curved. It's still a perfectly strong, healthy bone. It's just built in a curve.
A lot of times they say that happens to like babies when they start walking too early. Why is that?
That is, early bow-legging with babies is that the bones aren't quite strong enough to stay straight and hold the body up, so the weight is bending them, and so they could solidify that way. There are also nutrition factors in bone remodeling. Calcium and vitamin D are the big ones, because if you don't have enough calcium in your plasma, you'll take it out of the bones. Vitamin D is required for your intestines to absorb enough of the calcium from your food. Vitamin D deficiency in children is called rickets. What happens there is the bones are actually softer. And that's another form of bow leg, which I think even these plastic models are too sturdy to do. and I don't have a meter stick. But that is, you know, like we saw with early walking, the bones just aren't strong enough and they bend under the weight of the body. But typically with rickets, they're staying soft because there's not enough vitamin D to get enough calcium into the body to fully strengthen them. Vitamin D deficiency in adults is called osteomalacia, which means bone softening. So you get the same issue where the bones are softer and less supportive, but with rickets you also get reduced growth because the bones can't lengthen without enough calcium. Vitamin C is also a factor in bone health because it's required for collagen synthesis. And if you remember, the bone matrix does have collagen fibers. It's the minerals, especially calcium, that make it hard, but the collagen holds it together and keeps it from breaking too easily. So without enough collagen, bones are brittle. They break more easily. It's more like a china cup where it could easily chip. In fact, there's a genetic defect where you can't make good collagen. They call it osteogenesis imperfecta because building bones, osteogenesis, they're never going to be that sturdy. You know, they can still support the weight, but they can't take stress from the sides. If you remember that movie Unbreakable, Samuel L. Jackson's character had it. Questions on bone remodeling? Skeletal system functions. The big ones, the textbook puts them together in one section, are shape, support, protection, and movements. Your bones can't move you, but they control where the muscles can move you, and they provide some leverage for getting things to happen. Shape, they provide our general body shape and some details like how wide are your shoulders, cheekbones, jaw, and things like that. Support, they hold you up. Protection, shield your soft organs. In the red bone marrow, blood cells are formed, so that's also a function of the skeletal system. And then mineral storage, that's happening within the bone tissue itself. The matrix of the bone tissue, so not counting the cells, is about 70% minerals by weight. So the other 30% is collagen and other things that just help hold it together. The major mineral is called hydroxyapatite. It's mostly calcium and phosphate, the same phosphate that's in your phospholipids and your nucleotides, just it's loose as an anion. There are smaller amounts of other ions, including various other metals that might have gotten into your body. One effect of lead poisoning is that there can be lead in the bones, which can make them softer because it's not as strong as calcium. And then bone matrix will be resorbed or deposited based on calcium levels in plasma. There's two major hormones in calcium homeostasis: calcitonin and parathyroid hormone. Calcitonin comes from your thyroid gland, which is best known for making hormones that regulate your metabolism, but it has certain cells within it that also make this one called calcitonin. The parathyroid glands are little glands on the back of the thyroid, and they just make this one hormone for calcium metabolism. When you get to the endocrine system in the next class, we'll take a closer look at these hormones. For now, we're just going to look at their effect on the bone. So if your plasma calcium is too low, that's your stimulus. Your receptor and control center is the parathyroid gland. It secretes its hormone, parathyroid hormone, and that tells the osteoclasts, the ones that resorb bone, we need more calcium. Break up some bone, put the calcium into the plasma, and that brings the levels back to normal. If your blood calcium is too high, then your receptor and control center is the thyroid gland, the cells that make the calcitonin, and that tells the osteoblasts to build some more bone, store this calcium for later. Questions on calcium homeostasis? We're going to take a look at some clinical applications. Bone fractures is the first one. There are several types of fractures. I'm not going to get into those, but if you're expecting to work in pediatrics or sports medicine, you may see some of these as injuries and get to learn them later. Whatever type of fracture it is, there's the same basic 4 steps to healing. We'll just break this cowboy femur right across the center to illustrate them. So the first thing that happens is it's bleeding because there are blood vessels in it. That blood clots. We call that a hematoma. That prevents further blood loss and pulls the soft tissues together. It's not that strong for holding the bone together, which is why you can't put any weight on it at this time, and why a splint would be really helpful. The second stage is called the soft callus, or cartilaginous soft callus. It's made of cartilage. So cells come in and they build a whole bunch of fibrocartilage. The kind with lots and lots of collagen in it. And that helps hold the edges of the bone together, and it replaces the clot. Third is the bony callus, or hard callus, and that is ossification. So, same as your endochondral ossification, that the bone started with, if it was endochondral, osteoblasts move in and turn the callus into spongy bone. And then last is remodeling. Puts compact bone around the outside, removes extra spongy bone if it's on the diaphysis where you don't want a whole lot of it. Yeah. Often there's a bulge at first that could be gradually smoothed out over time. So here's the hematoma, there's the broken blood vessels. And then here's the soft callus. All that purple is the fibrocartilage, and some of the spongy bone has started. Here the whole thing has become spongy bone, and that's the hard callus. And then finally, the outer part is turned into compact bone. The extra spongy bone is removed. Now, this one still has a bulge. Sometimes the difference will remain, and you can tell on x-rays if a bone has been broken before. It all depends on how smoothly it heals, how well it was set.
Would you still see the bulge from the outside, possibly?
Sometimes, yes. It depends on how close that bone is to the surface. So, like fingers and toes, there's not very much around them, so you'll often still be able to see that. Any other questions on fractures? The second clinical application is bone loss. There's 2 disorders here. Reduced bone mass is called osteopenia. Penia means lacking something. Osteoporosis is a specific pattern of bone loss where the trabeculae of the spongy bone are removed over time. And this makes the bones less able to support weights. It's sort of like your osteoclast playing a game of Jenga. Here's, we'll do head of the femur. Fill it with trabeculae, and every time parathyroid hormone says we need more calcium, they come in and take one out. The longer you spend with not enough calcium, the more of them get removed until the bones reach a point that they can't support the weight and they break easily. About half of Americans over 50 have osteopenia or osteoporosis to some degree. It's most common in women post-menopause because estrogen is one of the hormones that stimulates bone deposition. So without it, we're not building as much bone, even if we have extra calcium. Some signs that can indicate if someone has osteoporosis: hunched posture,